This is the opposite of expanding. So here I'm starting with the expanded version, and I'm now having to simplify that back into the factorized version and put it back into brackets. So when you see the word factorize, you know that it just means to add in the brackets. So when you have a more simple question like this with just one x squared, then we can do it this simpler method. If you have a multiple, if you have 2x squared or 4x squared, then you'll need to look at the second half of this video to see how we can factorize those. So when we have these simpler questions, we're working out what times is to make 16 and adds to make 10, okay? And this is because if we think back to when we did our expanding, it's these two middle terms each time that add together to make our final middle term, okay? And that's why we're needing to add. And then it's the multiplying for this last part of the bracket that gives us our final number. So that's why we need to add and then to multiply. So we start with the multiplying. What times is together to make 16? So we're thinking about the factors of 16. So we have 1 and 16. We have 2 and 8, or we have 4 and 4. And now we've kind of looped back round, so they're all the factors of 16. And we're working out which ones add to make 10. And we can see there that that would be 2 and 8. So in my brackets, I'll have an x at the start of each one, since I've got the x squared here. And then I know that I've got a 2 and an 8. And I think they're both positive, but I can double check by expanding it back out. So if I expand this back out, then I can double check I get what I think I'm going to get. Okay, and we do, that works. That simplifies to 10x plus 16. So yes, I've checked it and it works. So the second one, this time we're going to work out what adds together to make what times is together to make 16 and adds together to make minus 10. So again, we just start with our factors of 16, okay, and then we're thinking what adds together to make minus 10. And this time we can see, well, if these were both negative, then that would give me my minus 10. But because a negative times a negative is a positive, we still get the positive 16 that we're looking for. So on this one, I have x and x. I know that I've got the 8 and the 2. This time they're both going to be negative. And that, when I multiply out, gives me my x squared minus 2x minus 8x, which is my minus 10x. And then a minus times a minus gives me my positive 16. So again, I can check it like that. So some other questions. So what times is together to make minus 12? And what's adding together to make minus 11? So if I think through the factors of 12, I have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, and then 4 and 3, 6 and 2, and so on. So it loops back round. And which of those are going to add together to make 11? Well, we can see that these are maybe going to have the best connection there with 11, okay? Because I'm multiplying to make minus 12, one of these numbers has got to be positive and one has got to be negative. Otherwise, I will not get a negative when I multiply them together. So I can now see that if I have my 12 and my 1, I need to make one of them negative so that I'm subtracting the numbers, so that I then end up with my minus 11x. So if I have minus 12 and then I add on 1, then I will get my minus 11x. Okay, so this is how we're going to factorize them. The next question is looking a little bit different because it's missing its middle term. So there's two things you can do here. You can either write it out in full and you can add in a 0x. And you're saying what times is together to make this and adds together to make this. Okay, or you can use the idea of difference between two squares. So difference between two squares tells us that if we have two square numbers and it's the difference or the subtraction between them, then I can factorize it very quickly. And it's the same thing but if I did it in full here. So let's look how that works. So if I'm looking for the factors of 36, I've got 1 and 36, I've got 2 and 18, 3 and 12, and so on and so on and so on. However, I can see straight away that I'm needing them to add to make 0. And one of them is going to need to be positive and one will need to be negative since they're multiplying to make a negative. So I then realise 6 and 6 make 36 and 6 and 6 are going to cancel each other out essentially to give me my 0x. And so that's what I'm going to need to use there. So I end up with x plus 6, x minus 6, okay? Because here the positive and the minus 6 are going to cancel each other out, and then I end up with my minus 36 at the end. So when you have this, the difference between two squares, all you're doing is square rooting the x, or the first part, and then square rooting the second part, and then you have one positive and one negative, either way round. So if on the second one I had x squared minus 64, this would just be x plus 8, x minus 8, because it's the difference between the two square numbers. So these are slightly harder. These questions are where you've got a multiple in front of your x squared. So we're going to do it in a similar way. We're going to say what adds to make this and what times is to make. And this time, you're actually doing it last time. It's just you didn't really notice. We're going to multiply these two numbers together. So it's actually what multiplies to make 10. Okay. It's just that last time we didn't need to do that because this was just a 1. So it would have just given me the last number. Okay. So what multiplies to make 2 times 5 and what adds to make 7. So let's think of what those numbers could be. So what multiplies to make 10? So we've got 1 and 10, 2 times 5, and then 5 times 2, 10 times 1. So what adds to make 7? It's these two here. It's 2 and 5. Okay, so 2 and 5 are what I'm going to use there. So now I'm going to rewrite that first question, but instead of having plus 7x, I'm now going to write 2 and 5. So I'm going to have 2x squared, and then instead of my 7x, I'm going to have plus 2x plus 5x. And then I've still got at the end there my plus 5. All I've done, instead of having the 7x, I've expanded that out into two numbers. Normally what I would do is take this and then simplify it to this. And I'm using these two to help me. And then once we've done that, we can treat the question as 2 halves. Okay, so ignoring what's on the right-hand side, looking only at the left, I could factorize that. I could factorize it into a single bracket because I noticed that 2x goes into both 2x squared and 2x. So I'm going to be left with an x plus 1. Okay, and then if I factorize the other side, I notice that I've got 5. And that leaves me with x plus 1. Okay, so it's positive 5 there that I've pulled out. And you'll notice that these brackets are both the same. Okay, and that will always happen. So if it doesn't, we've gone wrong somewhere. So x plus 1 and x plus 1. So essentially, I'm pulling out another kind of single bracket factorization. But another way to think of it is just x plus 1 is one of my brackets. And then the 2x plus 5 is my second bracket. So x plus 1 and 2x plus 5. And that's my final factorization for that initial question that was a little bit trickier. So let's have a go at that again with the second question. So I'm saying what times is together to make 30 and what adds together to make 17. So going through the factors of 30, I think I've already found it, but I could continue just to check. But this looks like it's going to make 17. So again, I'm just going to expand this into these. So I've now got 5x squared plus 2x plus 15x, and it never matters which way round you do this. These could have been the other way round, and these could be the other way round. Doesn't matter, it will still work. Okay, then I can split the question in half. So I've now got x I can take out as a factor, and I'm left with 5x plus 2. And on this side, I could take 3 out as a factor, and I'm left with 5x plus 2. And again, you'll see that I've got that same bracket on both sides, the 5x plus 2. And that means that my final answer is x plus 3. And that's for this part here, where it's on the outside. And then my second bracket is the 5x plus 2 that I have in both of my brackets. So the next one, let's just practice that a little bit more. So again, I'm going to multiply these two things together. So I'm looking at what times us together to make minus 30, and what adds together to make minus 7. So I'm looking at what times us together there. So things that times together to make the minus 30, I have 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and I can see there this is going to make the 7. So I have 2x squared when I rewrite it, and then instead of that minus 7x, I'm going to have minus 10 and plus 3, and that way I'll get the minus 7. So I need to be careful about which way round that minus and positive go. And then I have my minus 15 at the end. Then I split the question up, and I do my single bracket factorization. So I can take out a 2 and an x here, and I'm left with x minus 5. And I can take out a 3 on this side, and I'm left with x minus 5. And it's a positive 3 that I took out there. So my answer is the x minus 5, again that repeated bracket, and then 2x plus 3. So it's the parts that are left over outside of the bracket. 2x plus 3 and x minus 5. Okay, and then you could do the same one on this last question. So 5 times 12, and then you're looking at what times is together to make the 5 times 12, and what adds together to make minus 32. So have a go at that question as well and see if you can do it.